Okay. I'm really, my apologies. I was in a meeting which I couldn't leave. I did finally leave abruptly.
Right. So, I will cut short what I was saying because it didn't. I mean, it's important, but at the same time, I will not take too much of your time because all of you have been waiting for Dr. Balu to speak. Uh, so, as we've said, this is the second of the lecture. The first lecture we talked about Vivekananda and the message that he probably gave to, and then the message that he gave to the world. And in this second lecture, it's a subject that's been very close to uh, our hearts at SVYM. So that's the reason why we've chosen this. So good evening and welcome to the Vivekananda Lecture Series 2022. Like I said, a series of 12 lectures on the 12th of every month, January through December 2022. And for the second episode today, we have Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, who will be discussing the theme of Vivekananda and the intersection of science, spirituality, and service. This series is brought to you by the Vivekananda Institute of Indian Studies, which is a unit of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. And the VIIS goal is to introduce India and Indianness to the world. I don't think Dr. Balu needs an introduction, but I'll still go ahead and introduce him briefly to the audience here. Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, fondly known to all of us as Balu, is a widely respected development activist, leadership trainer, thinker, and writer. In addition to his MBBS and MPhil, he holds a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School, Harvard University. His living habits were greatly influenced by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, and at the age of 19, he founded the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, based on the principles of Satya, Ahimsa, Seva, and Tyaga. And he has spent close to 36 years of his life in the service of the rural and tribal poor in the forests of India. He is also the founder and chairman of the Grassroots Research and Advocacy Movement, GRAM, which is a public policy think tank in India. And Dr. Balu embodies a very rare blend of grassroots and macro perspectives and policy through his multifaceted experience of more than 3 decades. He's a visiting professor at Cornell and at IIT-Delhi. He teaches a course on leadership and human development. He coaches and mentors senior leaders in the non-profit sector, the corporate and the government sectors. He was also a member of the technical group set up by SEBI for setting up the stock exchange in India. He's currently the full-time member HR in the Capacity Building Commission of the Government of India, and he has authored 7 books in Kannada and English. The format of the lecture will be that Dr. Balu would start off by speaking for about 15 minutes on the topic that we have for the day, which is Vivekananda and the intersection of science, spirituality, and service. That will be followed by a moderated Q&A. We will also take questions that will come up in the chat that will come up. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Balu.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, and my apologies. It's absolutely unacceptable that I had to make all of you wait for some 10 minutes. It is just that one of the roles I'm playing necessitates that certain meetings I cannot but be there. I don't think I can speak more about it. And I finally managed to excuse myself and come. My apologies again. So this topic itself, I think I was just thinking through this subject of intersection, and it looks as though there are 3 separate channels. It's like a road, 3 separate roads converging into one. And I was half tempted to call up Ramesh and say, why are you even calling it an intersection? Because it sort of gives the semantic itself gives an idea that they're separate entities. I actually think, or rather we can say, they're all so aligned, you can't really separate out one from the other. And maybe for academic argument's sake, I can talk of it in separate boxes and then say how the boxes converge. It's like, it's like the river. The river can always claim that I am separate and independent. I'm flowing from point A to point B. Every river can say that, but once they join the ocean, what happens to them? It is something like that. You can talk of science as a separate stream. You can talk of the idea of service as a separate stream, and you can talk of spirituality as a separate stream. But then finally, these rivers, though they may flow separately to the person who's not really experienced the oneness of the 3 streams, and suddenly you realize there is no separation between the river and the ocean. So I want to spend some time just sharing what I was thinking as I was thinking about what to talk. So I'm going to actually start explaining this in 3 separate boxes just to make it understandable. and talk about what Vivekananda might have seen as service, what he might have seen as science as we understand it, in the world of empiricism and the world of experimentation, and then documenting it and sort of uh, repeating the same experiment again, getting the same results from that perspective, and spirituality as possibly the ultimate purpose of life itself. And then see whether are they really separate, do they converge, and how does Swami Vivekananda so pragmatically and seamlessly bring these ideas together. And then I'll open it up for all of you to respond. And I'll just take 8 to 10 minutes to explain these concepts. Now, if you really want to ask yourself the perspective of service that Swami Vivekananda talks about, he talks about it from the perspective of Seva. And Seva Bhav is very difficult to explain in a language of English, where the intensity of appreciating Seva is not seen from the narrow perspective of helping somebody. Help is a transactional process under the undercurrent of which is an expectation of at least gratitude in terms of a word of thanks. But Seva is an appreciation of the oneness of the other and recognizing that oneness through a process of duality of saying that I see God in the other. At the point of serving, you're not seeing the same God exists in both of us, but you're starting off saying that that man is poor or I am rich and therefore I'm helping him, but I'm not helping him at all. I'm using this as an opportunity to worship the divinity in him. You start off with that element of service and see service as an act. It's so beautiful. Everybody is a beneficiary in this process. Otherwise, if you say help, there's always a distant other as a beneficiary. But in service, all of us benefit. And the benefit that the person who's indulging in this act in this transaction of the worship of the other through this enabling process that he's involving in is his own evolution, and he's getting that benefit. So just keep that in mind. The way Vivekananda saw service was not, in his own language, not standing on a pedestal and saying, here, my poor man, take my 5 cents, where the separation of the I and the other is so distinct, where I am separate, I am better, and therefore I am giving you something. He demolishes that notion of giving to converting it to an idea of worship, where they are worshipping the divinity in the other. So he's bringing in several things. The product is evolution of oneself. The process is the way, the act of what you're doing to the other. And the spirit is recognizing the divinity in the other. And so keep this as the back of your mind. Now, the way he looks at science, and here I want to distinguish, Vivekananda is one of the fascinatingly articulate persons who spoke about spirituality itself as a science, the science of spirituality, as much as science itself as a spiritual act, the pursuit of science itself as a spiritual act. And I'll again clarify both of this. Let me just talk about science. Swamiji in his several talkings, writings, etc., lectures, he sort of places it so beautifully in context. He even sees science as an instrument of amelioration of poverty. He sees science as a destruction of ignorance. He sees science as a demolition of the superstition that India is fully loaded with. And he saw science as an opportunity for the masses and their lives to be better. So in a sense, he saw science as an instrument of making life better. And that is why he talks about his brother disciples taking a magic lantern and going from village to village, using science as the instrument, but the end outcome of that science itself is a process of seva, where the end outcome is the fight against poverty and the amelioration of the status of the masses. But science for Vivekananda was at 2 levels. Though in the explanation they look separate, but I think the seamless integral one. He spoke about man and the way man uses knowledge to control external nature, and that is what we all understand with the physical sciences. Now, I do chemistry, mathematics, metallurgy, architecture, engineering. Everything is outside of us. And then he talks about the internal nature and the science of the internal nature. And it's a science. If you actually read his commentary on the Jnana Yoga, as much as his commentary on Karma Yoga is the convergence of service as an act of spirituality, I think if you actually spend time between his Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga, seeing together his commentaries as a treatise, I'm not even going into that. But even if you look at the way Swami Vivekananda's commentaries are and the explanation of the various sutras of the Raja Yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he actually brings out the beauty of the science of it as an opportunity to dive deep inside yourself. And he doesn't even see that outside science is not useful. Just go inside yourself. It is not for him where he says, you know what, you just go uh, sit in the Himalayan caves and just think of yourself, because he knew that finally, if you are really embedded in society and the way we all understand the other, being separate from us, the other in the context, you can't live in the domain where me and Ramesh are the same. So I don't have to even join this webinar. He'll take care. There is a visible separation that all of us experience in everyday life. The reality of the visible separation, till we use the science of spirituality to transcend that actually lived separation, we are all in the process of that experience. The other needs service to be rendered to him. And therefore, Swamiji talks about Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya. What a beautiful way of explaining that the personal evolution, the evolution of the spirit or the inner nature and its expression should be through an act of worship of the other, where there is still a duality of the I and the other. But in this process of an opportunity of serving the other, you experience the oneness of the togetherness. I think it's an evolution, and that is the spirituality of it. I might sound confusing or I might sound complicated, but I think it's extremely simple. He gave us simple formulas. If I am very aligned to the world of just serving others, maybe I take the path of Karma Yoga. If somebody is aligned to experience the joy of the internal nature and understanding and diving deep inside, he possibly resorts to Jnana Yoga. Or he wants to go to the act of discovering it, use the science of discovering the inside, and then he goes to a set of practices. Now, that is where, if you want to look at it as, if you were to define spirituality as simplistically in Vivekananda's descriptions in various places, it is just an act of self-discovery. The discovering the true inner nature and reaching a state where you suddenly realize that true inner nature is the nature of everything around. And in the joy of that oneness of that living, that one lived experience of oneness, where your discovery of inner nature also parallelly means the discovery of nature of everything around you. And understanding the inseparability of this joy of living that oneness, that is a spiritual act. So he was very clear. Religion is an instrument, possibly a channel through which we can explore the spirituality. And as much as service could be a religion to me, or science itself could be a religion. And science, the pursuit of science, if you were to define it by collecting empirical data, using that data to repeat the experiment, and the repeated experiments actually has the same kind of results in everybody. If you look at all the practice of spirituality, from simple things like meditation to the 8 paths that given in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, everything are a set of clear principles that you deploy. Whether I deploy it or Ramesh deploys it, based on the medium that is deploying it and this sense of preparedness and this sensitivity antenna, the results are very similar. So the results can be repeated. The experiences that are getting accumulated by the end result of what you're performing could be very similar for each person, but like I said, depend on the preparedness of each person. So very clearly for Vivekananda, spirituality itself was a science. The pursuit of understanding oneself was such a deep-rooted science. So inquiry being the process through which scientific pursuits are done today, whether it's an Einstein or a Newton, the constant process of inquiry. And how are they different from a Shankara or a Madhva, whose entire life was built around inquiry, or a Ramana, whose only question in life was a simple, who am I? And the science of that inquiry itself, if you read Ramana's works and his whatever little he had spoken about and captured in the Ramana Gita or whatever you can call it, itself is such a deep process of indulging in inquiry. And that the scientific way in which Ramana describes it, a 16-year-old practices it on himself and describes it in a way in which any of us, you and I, can actually take it and deploy it. So where duplication of results is there, recording of evidence can be possible. And I believe that if you look at Swamiji and his thoughts, and I'm going to pause or stop here for some time, because I really love to get back to Ramesh and his questions and whatever all of you who have joined would like to ask of me, and what little I know, the way I have interpreted Swami Vivekananda. I think Vivekananda personified this so-called, I can't even call it divergent, easy to understand if you see them as divergent routes, but this fascinating convergence where he looks at Seva itself being done in a scientific way to appreciate how seva can lead to purifying your inner self and therefore keep becoming better and better, provided it is undertaken as a spiritual sadhana. And the sadhana part of it there was the selflessness that he kept on demanding. He said selfishness is a sin, where you're not doing it even to become better. You're not even doing it because you want to evolve. You're doing it because that's the only thing to do as a dharma. And the process of doing it is without any attachment or without any wanting the results of what you're doing it, which is spirituality again unfolding. And if you are doing it with that space where the doer completely diminishes over time, unfortunately, act of seva is so poisonously cancerous. The more and more you do, the doership keeps increasing to most of us. And if your life gets complicated with awards, rewards, and the Padma Shris that get thrown at you, then you actually become the doer most of the time. And I think the spirituality comes only when you transcend this and see this is an extraordinary opportunity for that evolution that Swamiji spoke about. And that very understanding this process itself is such a fascinating science. And you can experiment, each of us can do it, everybody can repeat it, and there's nothing like, you can't really put a formula and say you do this for 30 days, 31st day you'll get this, because the person participating in the experiment is also part of the experiment. Unlike in a laboratory, if you say hydrogen and oxygen are just two chemicals, and therefore they behave exactly the same way. Considering the two human beings don't behave exactly the same way, our sense of preparedness and our antennas being what they are different, and therefore the time taken is the differential. The experience might be differently explained, but the end outcome of that sadhana, that process, is a constant evolution. And to me, whether you are conducting inquiry for science, or whether you're conducting inquiry for spirituality, or whether you're using the process of service itself to inquire deep questions of why is the other that way? Why is the other separated? Why is the other even poor in the metric of economics? Why am I in a place of privilege? And you start going deeper and deeper, that kind of inquiry, it can lead us to a state where all of us can experience this fascinating convergence. And I think the immersive experience that one can generate, whether you perform science or the single-minded focus on understanding science. For example, if Einstein or Newton, Swami Vivekananda himself explains, if they were not, whether he had discussions with Tesla or with others, he was very clear that if you did not indulge in giving your 100% to the pursuit of that understanding of external nature, as much as he would advise his brother disciples to give 100% to the pursuit of internal nature, you wouldn't achieve what you're achieving. So he could see value in setting up an Indians of science as much as a value in setting up the Ramakrishna Mutt for spiritual practice, and as much value as setting up the Ramakrishna mission for the service part of it. So whether it's the Vivekananda University that they have set up today, or the scientific institutions that are inspired by Vivekananda, or some of the institutions that we run inspired by Vivekananda, the final act of convergence is a deep level appreciation that what, like Krishna says in Gita, paths might be several, that they finally lead to him. And I see it this way. These are just different buses we board, but without recognizing, we think we are all traveling on different routes. But actually, the buses are at different points of the route, and therefore we think that we're at different routes. Finally, the route is one. It takes us to the destination of our internal sort of flowering out, or that expression of that beautiful immersive oneness that we can all go through. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. Actually, you run through all the points that I had noted as questions. So I'll have to, so I'll just explain the intersection bit. So I think that's important. I looked at intersection not as a Venn diagram where there is a sweet spot that is developed, but rather as a meeting point where it is possible for, the question that was posed was, is it possible for science, spirituality, and service to meet at a point such that there can be synergy from the meeting of the three streams that apparently seem to be, divergent, and that is so I just wanted to.
No, I think it is very intellectually satisfying to separate them, because my sense of affirmation or my ego satisfaction comes only when I see myself as I'm working the space of social service. The moment you overwhelm me with this intersection idea or the oneness idea, I will simply give up service also. Similarly, a scientist gets his validation in society or his affirmation to exist only because he sees science as a specialty which he is very comfortable with. Other things sound in areas of incompetence for him. So I think a sannyasi would get overwhelmed if you say, your spiritual pursuits are all okay, but you must also, that's also a science. Now, the poor fellow maybe has given up science to become a sannyasi also. We don't know. So I think somewhere the intellectual separation is also a sense of emotional comfort for the people indulging in this. At one level, though, they look separate, but as you go through the experience of practicing some of it, you suddenly realize that separation itself is just it's an idea which is satisfying for me to embark on one path at least. But now I am prepared enough to absorb the fact that all of them are the same paths. I would look at it that way.
So one of the things, we are able to ask this question because we are talking about someone like Swami Vivekananda. Now, as I see it, Swami Vivekananda is someone who's even within the spiritual space, that space, he's an outlier in the classical sense. In the sense, for example, Ramana Maharshi understood himself, and we can assume that he also understood the other and all of those things, but he did not go out of that space. It was Vivekananda who, his influence even today is so high only because his spiritual, his influence was across multiple domains. Today, if you talk of education, every single website pulls out quotes of Vivekananda. You talk of science, they're able to relate to Vivekananda. You talk of spirit, you talk of anything, service. What explains this immense strength? There must have been some Shakti that animated him to have been able to manifest all of these things from one person. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can only share what I see as my interpretation. So you must pardon me, all these are my thoughts. Okay, right. I'm not saying these are the absolute thoughts of what Vivekananda might have thought. So I think Vivekananda is the most practical person I know of. That's him. I know of, I studied of him. And he knew that if how many of us can imitate Ramana Maharshi? We all admire Ramana Maharshi. We are all inspired by Ramana Maharshi's work, but I don't think I can sit in Tiruvannamalai or I can sit in the Patalaganga Ishwara temple and just think of contemplate on myself. Because the impossibility of emulating such extraordinary acts, whether it's spiritual or even seva, is what Vivekananda understood as a problem, in my opinion. His message is really practical Vedanta. He practicalized Vedanta at the level where even the Bhagavad Gita says, as many temperaments, so many paths. He knew that humanity, the way we are all crafted, have our own wirings. We have our own paths, our own temperaments, our own comfort levels with certain ideologies that we are all subscribing to. And if all of us have to find Vivekananda exciting, it is because the answer that he provides us in his thinking is so wide. But finally, it's just an entry point. Because the journey is so beautifully leads us to the same destination. But if I were to tell you that this is the only way to reach the destination, and I am not temperamentally aligned to it, I'll drop Vivekananda also. But because each of us can see Vivekananda, different facets of Vivekananda which appeals to us, we enter through that. Swami Vivekananda himself has remarked in several places. He says, to deconstruct or decode Swami Vivekananda's thinking in the way he's brought all of this together, itself may take 2000 years. And the way I see it is, every layer of Vivekananda we unpeel, and we think we've understood him a little more, I suddenly discover 4 more layers which I have to unpeel. So I think his practicality, and he also realized this is not a 1-day job, 2-day job, 3-day job. This is a continuously evolving process. And we human beings are distracted throughout our lives. We need exciting, sexy propositions every other day. We all need to be doing new things. If you actually take out the journey that Swami Vivekananda asks us to lead, it's very exciting. And if you look at my own, the way he even interprets simple act of service, there's a gradation of service he talks about. He says, talk about first physical service. I see a question which talks about a graded, titrated sense of de-identifying oneself. And I think that's exactly what Vivekananda answers. He says, start off with the complete sense of I am self, you are the other. Ramesh is sick. I, the doctor, am going to treat Ramesh. And when Ramesh gets better, I will say, you know what? I treated him and he got better. It's complete 100% identification with myself. Swamiji said, start with that, the physical act of service that we do. But as we continue the physical act of service, after some time, you suddenly realize that, you know what? I don't think just my knowledge is treating Ramesh. There's some magic, unspoken magic that's working in the background. That even if I'm there or not there, Ramesh will get better. Or even if I'm there, Ramesh can die. Right? So we start facing the frailties of the thinking of myself. And then that is where titration starts. And Vivekananda then says that is a time for you to think at the next level of service, deeper intellectual service, Bauddhic Seva. And there also you can start off saying that, you know what, I am helping 100 children study. But you can only get, you can build a school for 100 children, but you can never really get 100 children to learn. So suddenly you realize even that for me it happened. I always talk about the first set of 28 children. I was arrogantly believing that I got 28 children to school. I got 28 children to sit inside a hut. That is all I can say. But by the time I understood, I'm getting them to learn that I had shrunk also. I knew that learning is a process which evolves, for which I had very little to contribute. And then you start becoming that 100% become lesser and lesser. That's why Swamiji talks of spiritual service at the last. This is the highest expression. As you evolve after graduating from physical to intellectual service, suddenly you understand spiritual service. And to me, my understanding of spiritual service today is the spiritual service I did for myself through the instrumentality called SVYM, where my evolution began with complete identification of I am the doer, to completely understanding that I am just an instrument. I can only give my personal examples. My 40-year journey, sometimes I ask, what did I set out for? Where am I in life today? Why am I sitting in Delhi? And where I have to, I never like being late, as all of you know. And if I'm forced to be late by 10 minutes and events which are truly beyond my control, where I know I cannot walk out of the particular session or meeting, I suddenly feel that why am I even thinking I'm in control? These things are, it just happened. Why am I even positioned where I am today? Why was 40 years was a preparation to put me where I am today, to get something done which is not even in my mind. So I think that is a beautiful expression of that, the sense of instrumentality of the divine, where things flower out, play out, and it expresses itself. I know it's a long answer, but I think Vivekananda practicalized it for us.
No, I think you unpacked quite a lot actually. The long answer answered quite a lot of questions. One of the things that I've seen you talk about, and suddenly struck me when you said that you started off with doing service, and then gradually it took you time for you to realize that and all of those things. So if we say that the motto, for example, Shivajnana Jiva Seva, which says see that what you're serving is the divinity within the other. So as you keep serving the divinity within the other, do you finally start realizing that the same divinity also dwells within you? That's the kind of reverse progression that happened with you as well.
I wouldn't say reverse progression. Suddenly, I think it's, to me, I can explain it as an unexplainable sense of oneness. It can manifest as an expression of love. It could manifest as an expression of where you are so comfortable with the other, there is no other. It's so difficult to explain.
No, that is what I meant. I said once you start seeing the Shiva within everyone, then you realize that that very same Shiva dwells within you as well.
Or there's no Shiva anymore, but there's no other also anymore. And it's a very powerful experience. Maybe my expressions don't do justice to that this explanation of that experience. And I don't even think they're constant, at least for me. I would be lying if I say that 24/7 I live in that space. No, I think we forget that sense of oneness. At least I forget many times, and I slip back. So it's not as though today you're 0%, you become 5, 10, 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 100. You also come back to zero. I think life is about, and I think the spirituality and the sadhana that spirituality describes, the discipline that you need, the determination that you need to have, and the dispassion you need to exercise is what incrementally can increase it. You forget that hard work will slip back. And my life has been a journey of going up and down like a pendulum. Suddenly you slip, you say, oh my God, what is happening? I failed. And then you, at that point, you will not say, you know what, this happened. But each of us, I think, go through that. So I think the journey itself is something where we must accept that it is not a one-way street where you keep climbing the steps up, and going down. You slip, sometimes you slip so much that you fall to the bottom of the cliff, but you continue and go up again. I would only say my conviction in these paradigms, in these principles are so strong that it inspires me that even when I slip and swing back, when the pendulum moves back, to again start the journey to move forward. That much I can say with great courage and conviction.
I don't know. I'm just playing the devil's advocate a little here. And if Vivekananda were to be alive today, and how do you think he would see what we see as great leaps and bounds in the areas of science and technology? And strangely, even there seems to be at least a gradual erosion of spiritual values, not necessarily the spirit of service, but essentially in spiritual values. At least that is how we see things play out. So, how do you think he would have tackled something like this? How would he see this
I think
apparent dichotomy?
if I were to understand Swami Vivekananda properly, he would have possibly laughed at all of us and said, "You're spending so much time on artificial intelligence. Are you really spending enough time on the natural intelligence embedded inside you?" So he said, external nature is artificial intelligence, internal nature is your natural intelligence. Both are important. He would not ridicule the external artificial intelligence. At the same time, he would not lose sight of the natural intelligence. So Vivekananda would have reminded us that our excessive obsession with external nature is evolved and taken us to the level where we can create the Wuhan virus to destroy mankind, as much as work together to build the vaccine to protect us also. But he would have also made us think and ask, why the hell did I intelligent behaviors which allows all that to happen? Can I have a deep dive inside me? So I think Vivekananda would have had a nice laugh and said, how lost are you, mankind, that you're so focusing on external nature? But turn around and start diving deep inside, and then you'll find the beauty of managing both so well. And I think finally, if a man is not even capable of managing one's own internal nature, how can you trust him with something like an atom bomb or a virus?
It's a question that came up initially in the chat, but then it seemed to disappear. So I'll ask that. So the question of and I remember having a conversation with you on it earlier about servant leadership and how it is now credited to. It should be credited to Swami Vivekananda because he first.
Credited to Robert Greenleaf, unfortunately.
Yeah, Robert Greenleaf. Yeah. So do you think servant leadership, as Vivekananda saw it, would constitute the intersection of science, spirituality, and service?
I think if it's practiced in the spirit in which Swami Vivekananda said. So Vivekananda didn't speak of servile leadership. It was not servility. Servant was an attitude. Even the word servant, I think, should be seen in the right perspective. This is the spirit of serving, not as in servility or the slavish attitude, but the spirit of serving the other, gradually evolving oneself to becoming the other, and then in a co-generated space, expressing one's brilliance of leadership, whatever you call it. I think it would be a very good example of this expression, because to me, leadership itself is one non-ending. The practice of leadership itself is a sadhana of spirituality, and leadership itself is to keep evolving yourself to express the other. Evolution of the inner space and the outer expression of that leadership is for societal good. So the Atmano Mokshartham is as integral to leadership as Jagatithaya is. The context of efficiency and effective deploying of the inner power for outer good is the highest expression of leadership. And so everything that you said, it brings in attitude, it brings in motivation, it brings in toolkits that you need to express yourself. It also brings societal good. And I would say possibly the best word that Vivekananda at that point of time could think was servant leadership, and that would have been a reason, because he spoke about it in the US actually when he first used the word. Maybe in the context of a society which is traditionally seen as materialistic, I feel that is a place where Swamiji would have possibly wanted to use it, because that context it appealed. But today I myself see it. If I talk of Vivekananda, possibly I'll have 30-40 people in my lectures. If I'd announced my lecture as servant-based leadership, I might have had 10 times more. That's a very sexy topic. Everybody wants to listen to it, right? So I think Swamiji capitalized on that fashion statement of servant leadership, but he would have meant this experiment of convergence.
I'm seeing a few questions that are coming up in the chat which seem to speak about. I think there is still that dichotomy difference between science and spirituality. I think the question that is not being asked, but it's mind, is that science is analytical and experimental, but spirituality and service essentially are emotional and experiential, and the experience is individual, Whereas, the experiments of science are repeatable and replicable, which may not be true in the spiritual sense. But
No, I disagree. In fact, that is an opening statement itself. I strongly disagree. Science and analysis of sciences and the external factors of where you're looking at a combined hydrogen and oxygen, you get water. Hydrogen's state doesn't change. Your science can only limitedly explain it. It's the physical state, you're able to explain it. Ramesh and Balu, the way the package of experiences, the package of all the vasanas that we are loaded with, and if you were to strongly believe in the opportunity for birth as an opportunity for again indulging in the sadhanas and burning it out that way I do, we're all at different levels of evolution. We're all at different stages of our life where different experiences will actually be interpreted in different filters, and therefore we're all at different starting points. It's like a relay race where each runner is standing at a different point. But unfortunately, here the track is not curved. It's still a straight track, and the end point is, for some it is farther off, for some it's closer. But that is why we think, when we analyze, we think, okay, if it takes me 4 years to reach this point, it should take you also 4 years. No, but you're actually 4 years behind me, and therefore it will take you 8 years. So I think the analysis should be in the context of that appreciation of the media which is experiencing it, and not just the experience or the tools that you're using for experiencing it. So I believe you can be as analytical, you can be as clear. I can even challenge people today and say, if you were to just, I have deconstructed Swamiji and the practices that he recommends in various levels into what I teach in enlightened leadership. How do you take care of the heart, body, mind, and soul? And a set of experiments that you can try on yourself. And if all of us assume that we're all having the same starting point, after 8 weeks, I can guarantee what the minimum endpoint will be. Some of you would have crossed the minimum endpoint, but I can definitely tell you what the minimum endpoint will be. But what you need is the discipline, the determination to do the set of practices. The problem comes because of differential levels of evolution. Some of you might actually do it, some of you may not do it. And therefore, you'll go back and say the end experience is different. So I believe that I don't see a dichotomy. Maybe I'm so passionate about it that I'm explaining it strongly. But to me, why can't all of you also not see the dichotomy? That's the way I would look at it.
No. I think we're not talking of two very different things. I think we are more or less in the ballpark. But the essential, the question that I was, or rather the question that I was coming to is that if you look at the manifestations of the expressions across multiple spiritual leaders, it has not been the same. The way they, or let me just rephrase that, their explanation of their experience, or rather the lack of explanation of their experience, because the experiential state cannot be explained, has meant that there has not been any consistent explanation of that final state of experience. Whereas in science, you can create an experiment that is just repeatable as well as replicable. That's the limited point I was making, and pointing to the dichotomy that is in multiple minds.
I'm just trying to explain. Maybe my explanation is not done appropriately. Well, if you combine hydrogen and oxygen, you'll also get water. If I combine it, I'll also get water. That is science. Whereas you do sit in Himalayas for 10 years, I sit in Himalayas for 10 years. Why aren't we at the same point? Why are they, somebody might have no experiences, somebody might have many experiences. I would look at, we come across different kinds of people. I can only speak about two extraordinary people. I would make it three extraordinary people that I have personal experiences with, and I can use them as the opportunity to explain the science. I saw three different personalities. I saw three different kinds of people. Three of them lived three different kinds of lives. Intellectually, would explain things to me in three different ways. One was the Paramacharya himself, and several times he would explain to me like he explained to a child. And I would even feel, what is this man thinking? I'm such an idiot. I can't understand what he's saying. Telling me that, you need 1 rupee from 1 lakh people. So many eyes should watch you. I said, such a high, great jnani has to give me this kind of example. But then, maybe that is the entry point for you to enter that personality and then understand his science. Achalanji, on the other hand, is to be a master storyteller constantly interspersing his stories with Atma Bodha or Viveka Chudamani. And I would not know why I used to go to him, whether for the story or for the cup of tea or for the Atma Bodha. But the end result was he had one particular set of experience which I was describing. As much as I have read about Paramacharya's experiences, and when my interactions with him were, I would just sit in front of him. And personally, I've had such fascinatingly touching, life-changing experience. I can't even describe them. And I had another very practical monk, which I've also written about, Swami Suresha, who for most people wouldn't have seen the deep Advaitin that he was. Even at a time when he was suffering and dying on the deathbed, when he had no idea who the hell he was as a human, as a body, that deep sense of unexplainable oneness that he could communicate. Maybe it was, you can say I was hypnotizing myself to believing that, but I can tell you that all the three, the relationship, the intensity of the relationship, the expressed and unexpressed transfer of knowledge and experience I had, I would not rate them any different. So to me, they're the same. And you cannot even explain these things, I think. In Ridgely manner, where Swami Vivekananda sat in meditation under a tree, the tree does not exist. Now we can always say we are sort of convincing ourselves to experience it, or we are hypnotizing us. It's a sense of self narratives that we give ourselves. The tree which Swamiji sat under is dead and gone. Other married, its progeny is a tree there now. But just going into that space is a completely different experience. And it is not just me, a person accompanying me who's only heard of the name Swami Vivekananda. When I told him this, he went and had this. Then came back and told me, he said, when you told me, I thought it was, and how do you explain it? I think the limitation of science as you understand it is still not evolved to the point where these spiritual experiences can be explained. And when it does, we'll suddenly realize all three are just using different test tubes, different beakers, and different flasks, but they're all making the same water. I put it that way.
I think the fact that we seem to be slightly disagreeing on this itself is a reflection of how difficult this entire thing is to unpack. And I think one of the things that quite a few people sent in some questions. One of them they wanted, and I need to ask is, could you share some personal tips? Vivekananda talked about internal as well as external consistency in everything that you do. So they wanted to know from you if there are specific practices that you have incorporated into your daily life, into your sadhana or whatever, that has helped you bring your internal as well as your external things into absolute consistency to the extent possible.
See, I think certain things are very conceptual. Certain things are the conceptual leading to the experiences reinforce your faith in the conceptual. I am a very studious student of reflective practices. I don't end my day without reflecting on, and then my yardstick of reflection or my asking myself, what am I reflecting on is the life I led today in some way contributed to evolving myself at one level, and asking this question, in that evolution, was I useful to somebody outside? And then I would sort of ask myself, did I today experience a sense of separation, the other? And if you got angry, if you shouted at somebody, if you were claiming reward for your actions, all these are powerful expressions in the space I operate in for the other. Even simple things like I write an article or somebody calls you up with this great article. In that one instant of time, you feel, oh, I wrote a great article, separation has come in. Or if I feel in that expression of you saying it's a great article, I never felt overjoyed that I wrote the article, but the fact that the article emerged as good. There's a nuanced separation in what I'm talking. I think that is an understanding of oneness. That these are all different ways of looking at it. So I use everything as a barometer while reflecting at the end of the day, how many opportunities I had today where I suffered from separation, or I unwittingly enjoyed the benefit of oneness. I also reframe my reflection and ask myself, if my purpose of life is Atmano Moksha, and if my convictions are driven by Swamiji and his principles, how much of Jagat Hita I did today. So I don't see myself as member of the Capacity Building Commission, mandated to do 8 things that the government has asked me to do, but I see it as an opportunity to express the enormous power that might have got generated internally over the last several years in whatever way it has, expressing to create societal good without claiming credit for it. And it's a great opportunity, and operating in an ecosystem where if you don't claim credit for it, then you're a nobody. Come to Delhi, try to be a nobody, you'll become a great spiritual sadhak. Now, Delhi is, I always used to wonder, everybody would tell me Delhi is the most manipulative environment to be in. I see it as a great God-given opportunity to subsume the temptation of visibility, to subsume the spirit of saying I did something. It's every day if you don't say I did it, you're nobody here. So in a space where you have to constantly reiterate you're somebody, constantly doing what nobody does, what everybody should be doing, but doing it with the thought that you are a nobody itself is a spiritual opportunity. And this is what reflection helps me to process. And did I do that? Is what I ask myself. As a set of standard practices, it's very simple. I say these things matter. Care of the heart, body, mind, and soul. What are the inputs you give to your heart, body, mind, and soul? What are the set of exercises you're indulging in this? And what are the set of rest that you're able to give? Good, decent food, decent water, eating only how much you need. All the practice I keep describing in my leadership. This not leadership is just instrumentality of expression for me, but it's a spiritual dimension that matters. Whether it's yoga, some exercises for the body, whether it's a constant effort to promote your prefrontal cortex, a center of which is biologically now proved to be a center of consciousness, whether it is pranayama that you do regularly, whether it is a constant, even if the meditation is disturbed and your meditation is not complete the way you want to, but not giving up on the practice. Many times I've sat in the plane and done it. It looks silly that the fellow next to me thinks I'm sleeping. It's okay. I don't care what he thinks. Constantly evolving your intellectual abilities and acquiring a set of knowledge, not for knowledge's sake, but knowledge for Jagat Sita. That's also an act of service. So every opportunity that you're indulging in using your heart, body, and mind should be the intent of discovering your soul. And these are the set of practices I try to possibly, I have been trying. I can't say I'm 100% there, but I am energized enough to feel that is the right path. And I'll tell you how I feel that. Not by the experience of the right path, but when there are gaps and spikes in the right path, I don't do anything for some time, and I feel the negativism that creeps into me when I'm not having these practices on an everyday basis. It reinforces in me what the benefit of the practices are, and therefore I go back to where it was. So, just take care of your heart, body, and mind. Love unconditionally. Give of yourself to the other without any expectation of return. At least say, can I do 2 hours of seva with the bow of seva I'm talking? Try that. As much as meditation for 15-20 minutes a day is important, even that act of what you're doing to somebody else without even asking yourself why I'm doing it. I think these are simple techniques, and keep expanding your knowledge. Vivekananda was a master role model for that. From archaeology to anthropology to neurobiology, he possibly tried to read everything and understand everything. And that's the external nature. But use that knowledge to go deep into the internal nature. Use experience of diving deep into the internal nature to manifest outside to help people to do better in the external world outside. So again, my thoughts may sound repetitive and complex, but this is my understanding of Swami Vivekananda.
There's one last question I think it did come up right at the beginning of the chat, is that I think one of the things that people are finding difficult, they're grappling with, is how do they actually start off? If they want to do service, if they want to do or touch their own spirituality, let's say service. So I think that's the question that came up. How do they start off is the question that they're asking.
Simply look around and say, which other human body? The other. Start with the other. Start off with Vivekananda says it so beautifully. Start with the I. And I think centrifugal, the centripetal, the right word. Go concentrically expand, he says. Expansion is life, he says. Start selfishly with the other, take care of this heart, body, and mind. Express it to the other and say, what can I do to the other? The physical body needs something. Old man needs something. Fellow who's hungry needs something. So just take care of the sharirik seva, what the sharira needs. Use that opportunity to evolve and then go to the, keep expanding the circle. It could be the man you see every day, to the man on the street, to the man in your village, to the people in the country, to the people in the world, entire world. There's so much. You have 8 billion people to worry about, right? So whether it's Timbuktu or Zimbabwe or a small little island somewhere in the Caribbean, everybody is Shiva waiting to be worshipped. Then there's no boundaries, there's no nationalities, there's no passport required. So there's so much to do. We'll run out of lifetimes of doing that. So I think we are giving ourselves excuses not to start. We get so overwhelmed with the problem outside, we think we're so insignificant, I can't make a difference. This is something people keep telling me. We are so small, what difference can I make? Even a small ant can make a difference. Let the ant enter into your nose. You'll know the difference. Right? So stop thinking that you are incapable of making a difference. If not anything, at least you'll make a difference to your inner self. So every human being that is out there is a powerful opportunity to be capitalized on for this pursuit of understanding yourself. See them that way. Give of yourself 100% to that act. Give your love unconditionally. Have no expectation in return. And you will start suddenly discovering 1,000 reasons, 1,000 ways in which you can do this.
That is quite an apt point at which we've also run out of time. We've been speaking for close to 55 minutes now. I just want to take this opportunity. Thank you. I think the comment also said that people are saying that it's gotten them thinking, and they'll probably mull over everything that has been discussed and then come up with something else. I want to now hand it over to Dr. Rekha, who's going to be giving the closing remarks. Dr. Rekha, it's over to you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ramesh, first of all, for bringing in this insightful concept and questions, understanding the idea of Swami Vivekananda through Dr. Balu. And sir, it's always been an inspiration hearing from you through your talks and also your books, especially about Swamiji. So thank you very much. And we're very happy that this lecture gave us an opportunity to connect with you amidst your busy schedule. And for sure, you know that you would not have refused it, especially this conversation or the lecture. Yeah. It was in fact a great reflection on the key points discussed today. Starting off relooking at all the three components in different boxes, as Dr. Balu shared. Seva as appreciating the oneness, spirituality as self-discovery, and science as instrument of making life better. And put it in a very simplified way, that the alignment being selfless seva in a scientific manner for self-discovery. I think that was a great way of introspection, sir. And along with the stages of seva you shared at the levels of physical, intellectual, leading to spiritual seva. I think Dr. Balu also shared his reflective practice every day on self-growth and societal good, stressing on managing inner self rather than being obsessive to external agents. Ramesh, I think rightly said in the beginning that this subject has been very close to our heart at SVYM. So I think let's conclude believing that real progress and development happens when science and spirituality go hand in hand. So once again, we thank all of you for joining us today, and invite you to keep this spirited conversation on the 12th of every month, marking the 160th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda. So have a great weekend and namaste. So thank you once again, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll be back the 12th of the next month. A recording of this video would shortly be available on YouTube. It's also gone live on YouTube, but I know that a few people have also logged in on YouTube. And so like, share, subscribe our videos so that we get to, share all of this with more people. And I hope each one of you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it in bringing it to you. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Dr. Balu. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and participating. Thank you.